Get her out now! Mr. Whitaker's voice shook as he hissed into his mic. That black maid, she cannot be anywhere near this meeting. But the elevator had already chimed. Mr. Chen, the Chinese billionaire, stepped into the lobby and started speaking rapid Mandarin. No one understood. Except one person. Naomi Ellis, the hotel maid, looked up and responded. Her Mandarin was flawless, her tone diplomatic. The lobby froze. What no one knew was that Naomi wasn't just a maid. She held degrees from Harvard and Beijing, and she had waited quietly for this moment. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Naomi Ellis clocked in every morning without fanfare, pushed her cart, kept her head down, never spoke unless spoken to. For 18 months, she scrubbed marble floors, replaced luxury sheets, and listened to conversations no one thought she could understand. But Naomi wasn't invisible. She was watching. Every smirk, every insult, every decision made under the assumption that she was just the help. And Mr. Whitaker, the man running the show, never once asked what brought her here. He only saw what she wore. What he failed to see would soon cost him everything. So who was Naomi Ellis? Really? Why would a woman with international credentials and degrees from two of the world's top universities be wiping down glass tables in a five-star hotel lobby? What had she left behind? What was she waiting for? And what exactly happened during her private meeting with Mr. Chen that sent shockwaves through the entire hotel staff and nearly ended a decades-old empire? This isn't just a story about language. It's about ego, about status, and about the moment a man in power realized he wasn't the smartest person in the room. Naomi Ellis was 33 years old and came from a narrow brick townhouse on the east side of Baltimore, the kind with creaking porch steps, peeling paint, and a mailbox her mother refused to replace because the rust gave it character. She was the youngest of three, her father a city bus mechanic, her mother a secretary at a charter school. Their expectations were simple. Finish high school, don't get into trouble, and try to be better than the generation before. Naomi did all that, and more. She didn't just graduate, she soared. She earned a scholarship to Georgetown, then transferred to Harvard, where she earned her graduate degree in East Asian linguistics. Her thesis on tonal dialect convergence in Mandarin Chinese earned praise from Beijing University. She was invited to guest lecture. By 29, Naomi spoke 6 languages. Mandarin was her strongest, not just conversationally, but professionally. She translated diplomatic transcripts, consulted on cultural training for Fortune 500 companies. She even helped develop AI voice recognition models in Mandarin for a U.S. tech firm. By 31, she had job offers across 3 continents. She'd never planned to return to Baltimore, but in March of 2020, the world stopped. Lockdowns froze budgets. Universities slashed departments. Naomi's contract was one of the first to be terminated, quietly with a short email. No severance, no recommendations. Just a suggestion to check the adjunct portal next semester. Her consulting clients halted travel, paused contracts, or vanished entirely. 1 month turned to 2. Her inbox filled with nothing but positions closed notices. Her rent was due, her savings dwindled, and the woman once flown first class to Shanghai to interpret policy briefings found herself ironing uniforms for a job interview at the Wellington Grand Hotel. The listing said, room attendant. She told herself it would be temporary. 30 days, 60 at most, until the economy found its feet again. But days turned into weeks. The work was quiet, repetitive. The same beds, same floors, same blank stares from guests. She kept her accent neutral, her eyes lowered, and never volunteered a word beyond good morning. Her resume, locked in a drawer, her degrees, still framed, still pristine, now collecting dust inside a cardboard box in her sister's basement. Naomi became invisible by necessity, not by choice, and yet She watched everything, because being overlooked gave her something no title ever could. Access. The freedom to listen, to study how people moved when they thought no one was paying attention. And no one paid less attention than Mr. Whitaker. 58 years old, pressed suits, silver tie clips, and teeth that gleamed like hotel lobby marble. He introduced himself as a hospitality architect. But beneath that charm was a man obsessed with perfection and image. If the flowers weren't centered, if the lobby music skipped a beat, if a staff member wore socks half a shade off uniform, there would be consequences. He called the staff my people, though rarely remembered their names. He kept binders on every employee, not for performance but for optics. He didn't care if the rooms were spotless. He cared if they looked spotless to VIP guests. And Naomi? She didn't exist in his world. She was a speck in the background, replaceable, forgettable, just another invisible black woman with a name badge and a cart. Which is why when the Wellington Grand was chosen to host Mr. Chen, the Chinese billionaire and global real estate tycoon, Mr. Whitaker doubled his obsession with appearances. Mr. Chen wasn't just wealthy, he was strategic, known for testing the integrity of those who served him. Sometimes it was through language, other times it was silence. He once pulled out of a $70 million resort deal because a server addressed him before his advisor did. There were rumors he wore a mic to record what staff said about him when they thought he was out of earshot. Mr. Whitaker knew all this. And still, he didn't think to ask if anyone on staff spoke Mandarin. He just assumed they wouldn't, because the people who cleaned his hotel didn't matter, until they embarrassed him. Naomi Ellis knew exactly who Mr. Chen was. She'd read his interviews, watched his speeches, translated one of them in grad school for a case study. She had no intention of speaking to him. That wasn't her place anymore. She cleaned rooms, cleaned silence. But in the days leading up to Mr. Chen's arrival, something shifted. Naomi noticed tension in Mr. Whitaker's voice. He barked orders harder. He told the concierge to smile with less teeth. He demanded that certain staff be kept away from the lobby during peak hours. And then she heard it, in the break room. His voice through a walkie-talkie. That black maid? What's her name? Naomi? Keep her out of sight. We don't need distractions. That was the moment Naomi made her decision, not out of pride, not out of defiance, but out of something deeper, the understanding that silence might keep her safe, but only for so long, because one day someone was going to speak for her, and she needed to make sure it wasn't someone like Mr. Whitaker. The morning of Mr. Chen's arrival began before sunrise. By 5 a.m., the Wellington Grand smelled like polished wood, imported citrus disinfectant, and nervous sweat. The executive chef had been summoned at 4:15 to remake the breakfast tray for the third time. The bellmen were told to stand taller and to nod, but not too often. The floral arrangements were repositioned 9 times. Mr. Whitaker paced the lobby with a leather binder pressed to his chest, issuing orders without making eye contact. He didn't trust smiles. He trusted silence, timing, and the illusion of control. The staff gathered in the service corridor at 7 a.m. sharp for what he called the command huddle. Mr. Whitaker's voice was crisp, sharp, and laced with threat masquerading as elegance. Today is not about routine, he began. Today is about perception. Mr. Chen will see everything, so we will show him perfection. No surprises, no talking out of turn, and no unsightly distractions near the lobby. His eyes paused on Naomi Ellis. Naomi, you'll be reassigned to East Tower floors 3 through 5. Stay clear of the main level. We don't want to overcrowd. He didn't wait for her nod. She was already invisible in his mind. Naomi said nothing. She turned without a word, pushed her cart down the hallway, and disappeared behind the service door. But her thoughts didn't disappear. They sharpened. She knew Mandarin wouldn't be a requirement for a maid. She also knew Mr. Chen often opened meetings in Mandarin just to test people's reactions. It wasn't meant to embarrass. It was meant to reveal. He studied who people became when they didn't understand the language, who smiled anyway, who panicked, who condescended. Naomi had studied these cues before, in lecture halls, with whiteboards and a pointer in her hand. Today she carried towels and glass cleaner instead. At exactly 9:13 a.m., Mr. Chen's car pulled up to the front of the Wellington Grand. A black Mercedes Maybach, tinted. The door opened, and out stepped Mr. Chen. No entourage, no translator, no entourage of assistants. Just him, a single sleek briefcase in hand and a face carved in stone. Mr. Whitaker rushed to the glass doors, chest puffed, palms dry only from constant wiping on his blazer. "Mr. Chen, welcome, sir," he beamed, extending his hand. Mr. Chen did not take it. He gave a polite nod and began speaking rapidly in Mandarin, a string of instructions, layered with subtle tones. His eyes scanned the lobby as he spoke. Staff froze, unsure whether to nod, smile, or bow. No one understood him. No one even tried. Mr. Whitaker's smile twitched. He laughed awkwardly and reached into his pocket. "One moment, please," he said, fumbling to unlock a translation app on his phone. He held it up and pressed the microphone. "Please repeat slowly," he said, angling the device toward Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen looked at the phone, then at Whitaker, his expression unmoved. He repeated his sentence. The app buzzed, then translated. "Do you always greet guests this way? With toys?" There was no smile on Mr. Chen's face. His jaw tightened slightly. His eyes drifted to the chandelier, then the floor tiles, then toward the service hallway. And that's when he saw her. Naomi Ellis. She had just exited the staff corridor, her cart in front of her, head low. She was supposed to be upstairs. But something had told her to stay, to wait. She hadn't rehearsed anything. But her mind had been preparing for this moment since she was fired from her teaching post, since she stepped back into a world where people assumed she had nothing to say. Mr. Chen looked directly at her. He said something again in Mandarin, more measured this time, but unmistakably directed at her. Whitaker turned around, confused, waving for security, unsure if a protocol had been breached, and then Naomi stopped. She looked up, straight at Mr. Chen, and in perfect Mandarin, she answered him, fluently, respectfully, calmly. She even used a regional honorific common in Shanghai, a small detail that most native speakers miss. The lobby went silent. Phones were lowered, breath caught in chests. Mr. Chen blinked once, then slowly smiled. It was the first smile anyone had seen from him that day. He responded to Naomi in Mandarin again, this time more casually. She nodded and replied, a short phrase that conveyed humility, readiness, and deep respect. He chuckled, actually chuckled, then turned to Mr. Whitaker, still holding his useless phone translator, and gestured for Naomi. Her, Mr. Chen said in English, clear as day. She comes with me. Mr. Whitaker froze. There was no protocol for this, no binder for it, no clause in his perfection plan. Naomi stepped forward, wiping her palms against her uniform. She didn't look back. She walked alongside Mr. Chen toward the elevator. The doors opened. He gestured for her to enter first, then followed. The doors slid shut. The staff remained frozen. Mr. Whitaker's mouth was slightly open, his fingers still clutching the app like a weapon that had just misfired. And just like that, the person he tried to erase from the room had become the only one worth listening to. The elevator hadn't even touched the top floor before Mr. Whitaker pulled out his phone and called Human Resources. His voice was tight, his tone mechanical. There's been a breach in guest protocol, he said. A housekeeping employee engaged a VIP client without authorization. I want a full review of her personnel file, immediately. No names were mentioned, but they knew who he meant. Naomi Ellis, the maid who had just walked into an elevator with one of the most powerful men in global real estate, the same woman he'd tried to remove from sight an hour earlier. By noon, Naomi was back on the floor, quiet, composed in cleaning room 418, as if nothing had happened. But behind the closed doors of the executive offices, the temperature had changed. The whispers began. So did the search. It didn't take long. Her file, the one Mr. Whitaker never bothered to read, contained more than MOP schedules and ID badge scans. It contained transcripts, published articles, recommendation letters from Ivy League departments, a scanned Harvard diploma, a master's degree from Beijing University with distinction, volunteer work in Rwanda, a copy of her thesis written entirely in Mandarin, and reviewed by 2 Chinese diplomats for cultural accuracy. She wasn't just qualified, she was exceptional. By 2 p.m., the Director of Human Resources, a woman named Mrs. Klein, walked into Mr. Whitaker's office holding Naomi's file like it was radioactive. "Did you know she speaks 6 languages?" she asked. Mr. Whitaker didn't respond. He was already staring at his desktop screen, watching in real time security footage from the lobby, watching Naomi answer Mr. Chen, watching Mr. Chen smile, watching the rest of the staff go still as statues while the one person he tried to erase stepped forward and became irreplaceable. It was too late. At 3:17 p.m., an encrypted email arrived at the desk of the hotel's CEO. It was from Mr. Chen's personal assistant. Request, effective immediately, Miss Naomi Ellis to be assigned as my cultural liaison and guest relations advisor for the remainder of my stay. No substitutions, no negotiations. Note: future dealings with Wellington Grand Holdings are contingent upon this arrangement. It was signed with Mr. Chen's seal, and below it, a simple addendum. She understands more than language. She understands respect. The next board meeting was called less than an hour later. 11 members, 2 on Zoom. 3 had never heard Naomi's name before that moment. And by the end of that meeting, everyone on the board knew who she was, and who Mr. Whitaker wasn't. The debate wasn't whether Naomi was qualified. That had been settled. The debate was about how to salvage face, both internally and with a billionaire who had just threatened to pull out of a $40 million expansion deal if his request wasn't honored. Half the room wanted to bend. The other half wanted to pretend this wasn't happening. But Mr. Chen had made his expectations clear. Either Naomi Ellis joined his executive circle, or he left the hotel, permanently, along with his business. Mr. Whitaker protested, loudly. He insisted the situation had been misunderstood, that it was blown out of proportion, that allowing a maid to jump ranks would disrupt the chain of command. She's not trained for diplomacy, he argued. She's trained for linen turnover and cart maintenance. Then Mrs. Klein read aloud Naomi's resume, word by word, degree by degree, experience by experience. And when she reached the line that listed Naomi's role as a guest interpreter for a Washington-based delegation during a U.S.-China economic summit, the room fell quiet. There was nothing more to say. By 6:45 p.m., Naomi was called into the HR office. She arrived in uniform, holding her ID badge like a shield. But instead of a termination notice, she was handed a new lanyard, white with gold trim, and a badge that read, Temporary Executive Access, Liaison, Guest Relations, Naomi Ellis. She stared at it for several seconds, not saying a word. Mrs. Klein smiled gently. He asked for you by name. You should go change. 30 minutes later, Naomi walked back through the same lobby, but not in a housekeeping uniform. This time she wore a navy blue tailored blazer with a hotel pin on the lapel. Her hair tied back neatly, a leather-bound notepad in her hand. Guests didn't look through her. They moved aside. Staff didn't speak over her. They greeted her, and Mr. Whitaker didn't greet her at all. He stood off to the side, watching her step into the same elevator she had entered that morning. But this time, she wasn't following Mr. Chen. She was leading him to the top floor, where a suite had been converted into a meeting space for negotiations that could shift the future of the hotel. And so, in less than a day, Naomi Ellis had crossed the line Mr. Whitaker spent his life drawing. She hadn't demanded it. She hadn't pushed for it. She had simply waited until her presence became undeniable. The following morning, the Wellington Grand woke up to a different kind of tension. Not the forced elegance of curated perfection, but a quiet, humming awareness that something had shifted, not on the surface, but beneath it. Naomi Ellis was no longer an unnoticed fixture in a gray uniform. She had become the focal point of the hotel's most critical negotiation in a decade, and the rooms she once cleaned were now being prepared for meetings she would lead. At 9 a.m., the boardroom on the 17th floor was cleared. Bottled water, embossed notepads, soft lighting. Mr. Chen arrived early, with no translator. He didn't need one. Naomi was already waiting, seated at the far end of the table, notes in Mandarin and English spread neatly in front of her. She didn't fidget. She didn't defer. She waited with the same composure that had once made her a respected lecturer and cross-cultural analyst. And when the meeting began, she spoke, clearly, fluidly, with nuance. She didn't just translate Mr. Chen's words, she interpreted them. She captured tone, meaning, subtext. She navigated cultural reference points. She softened hard edges and added precision to vague terms. More than once, Mr. Chen paused and glanced at her, impressed by her ability to translate financial figures with linguistic grace. He never corrected her. He never clarified. And by the end of the first hour, the board, once skeptical, stopped looking at their own notepads and simply followed Naomi's lead. She didn't ask for permission to present. She didn't need it. Instead, she opened a black folder labeled Wellington Global Positioning Proposal. Inside were pages of research, demographic shifts in Asian American luxury travelers, comparative hotel case studies from Singapore, Seoul, and Dubai, strategic partnerships, language accessibility gaps, staff development modules. At the top of the executive summary was a title, From Perception to Presence, Reframing the Wellington Grand for a Global Future. The room went still as she presented. One board member, a former marketing executive, whispered, "Where did she come from?" Another replied, "Apparently Harvard and Beijing." Even Mr. Chen leaned forward, occasionally nodding, occasionally smiling. When Naomi finished, she didn't ask if there were questions. She simply looked up and said, "This isn't about translation. It's about transformation." Mr. Chen folded his hands, turned to the board, and spoke in English for the first time that day. "She understands diplomacy better than any translator I've ever hired." There was no applause, no dramatic fanfare, just silence. The kind that follows the moment something irreversible has happened. A shift in power, a quiet acknowledgement of truth. But the truth always leaves a trail. That afternoon, an anonymous internal email began circulating among upper management. It was a screenshot, a message from Mr. Whitaker dated 2 days before Mr. Chen's arrival. It was short, just 9 words. That black maid better be kept out of sight. There was no context, no ambiguity, just a line soaked in arrogance, in entitlement, in a brand of prejudice that had gone unchecked for far too long. The board acted quickly. By 3 p.m., Mr. Whitaker was called into a private meeting. The door was closed. The conversation was brief. By 3:18 p.m., security escorted him out of the building. His ID was deactivated, his name removed from internal memos before the end of the day. The man who had spent his career micromanaging optics had become a liability no one could protect. Later that evening, Naomi requested an hour off the clock. She didn't go home. She took a cab to a quiet side street, 10 blocks from the hotel. She stood outside a narrow, red brick building, windows boarded, the paint around the door chipped. It was her old university office, where she once taught first-year students how to navigate tonal shifts in Mandarin, where she spent hours refining lecture notes, where she coached international students terrified of speaking aloud. The department had been shuttered 18 months ago. No one had replaced her. She stood there for a long time. In her mind, she could hear her own voice, younger, sharper, full of certainty. She could see her father standing at the back of the lecture hall once, just watching, his hands still stained from motor oil. She remembered the way he nodded when she finished that day. Just once, like he had no words big enough for how proud he felt. He was gone now. And so was the job, the title, the students, the classroom. But something else had survived. Her, the part of her that could not be erased by layoffs or uniforms or silence. That evening, when Naomi returned to the hotel, she passed by a cleaning cart, one she used to push. She paused, adjusted a crooked bottle on the top rack, then walked on. Her badge now read, Liaison to the Office of International Expansion. The Wellington Grand had never seen a press conference on its mezzanine floor, not in its 87 years of existence. The space had always been reserved for private functions, tastings, investor brunches, discreet contract signings between men in tailored suits and women in heels that didn't echo when they walked. But on that crisp Friday morning, velvet ropes were pulled back, cameras lined the perimeter, and in the center, flanked by 2 staff members and a translator who would never be used, stood Mr. Chen. He wore a navy overcoat, no tie, his expression calm, deliberate. In his hand, a single typed statement. No press kits, no logo walls, just his words. I have built properties in 17 countries. I have partnered with governments, with billionaires, and with brands older than any of us. But rarely, very rarely, have I come across someone who understands not just business, but people, with the clarity, restraint, and intelligence of Naomi Ellis. He paused. She is no longer a hotel maid. She is now, officially, my global liaison for North America. The cameras snapped, guests whispered, executives exhaled. But Naomi, standing beside him in a navy blue blazer, didn't move. She didn't blink. She accepted the moment without ceremony, without needing to perform her gratitude. Because this wasn't a miracle. It was math. It was long overdue recognition arriving with quiet precision. Within days, Naomi's inbox was full. Offers from luxury hotel chains in Boston, New York, and Vancouver. Invitations to speak on diversity panels, corporate language strategy boards, even a call from an international relations journal asking for an interview. But Naomi said no, not out of pride, not out of comfort, but because she understood something most of them didn't. The Wellington Grand was the place where she had once been overlooked, made small by a man who believed titles were more valuable than ability. And now, standing on the other side of that story, she knew this hotel didn't need to be left behind. It needed to be redefined, under her terms. She accepted Mr. Chen's position, but negotiated the flexibility to remain at the Wellington as a mentor, as a reformer, as a permanent voice in a building that once silenced her. She didn't want a plaque. She didn't want an office with a view. What she asked for instead was a seat at the table and the authority to make sure no one else like her would ever be invisible again. A week later, a new general manager arrived. His name wasn't important. What mattered was how he entered. With humility, with curiosity, and with a meeting Naomi personally led. In that meeting, she presented her framework for inclusive leadership, language access training, and internal upward mobility pipelines for staff, including maids, janitors, cooks, and front desk workers. The staff listened differently now, not because she had a title, but because they had seen what happened when she finally used her voice. On a slow Wednesday afternoon, Naomi sat in the break room, the same one she used to eat lunch in, where she would pretend not to hear staff gossip about promotions, firings, or who Mr. Whitaker was scolding that morning. She sat with a new staff member, a young maid, 22, fresh out of high school, nervous and quiet. Naomi was showing her how to use the updated inventory system. Nothing flashy, just 2 women, side by side, talking softly, laughing once or twice. The girl asked, "Did you always work here?" Naomi smiled. "No," she said, "but I always belonged here." She stood, straightened her blazer, and walked out of the room with the same quiet grace she entered with. No applause. No crowd. Just the sound of a young woman watching her, eyes wide, posture a little taller than before. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand recognition. She waited until silence became impossible. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked or where you worked? Would you have stepped forward like Amara or stayed silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next.